Captain Kelly Davis peered out the shuttlecraft viewport at the space dock, which was looming quickly into full view. The USS Excalibur sat passively as several work drones darted around her. Davis had only been in command of the heavy cruiser for 18 months, supervising and overseeing her refit. She never failed to experience the feeling of awe every time she saw these vessels. The massive ship had spent 18 months being refitted in orbit of Earth at the Starfleet dry dock facilities. Nearly 2 years ago, Excalibur had been towed into Earth orbit after the ultimate computer incident where the ship had sustained enough damage for them to consider scrapping her. However, the determination was to refit and install the newest advancements on the drawing boards and get her back in service. Refit really didn't justify the work done on Excalibur, as she had to be literally rebuilt from the keel up. With this second chance for life and service, the refit would give Starfleet another asset for many years to come. The shuttlecraft neared the docking port at the newly installed torpedo bay. Davis could now see the many other dry-docked ships in orbit, several light cruiser-class ships and a few of the newer destroyers. She made out the form of another heavy cruiser in an adjacent dry dock. She reached for the view screen controls as the shuttlecraft neared the port. The visual zoomed in on the ship. It was USS Enterprise. She smiled. Enterprise was the pride of the fleet and under command of a Starfleet legend. Her smile turned into a smirk.
Well, Jim, I finally got one of these babies now,
Kelly thought. Enterprise was likewise in dry dock, but only undergoing minor repairs and resupply.
Ma'am, we're docked,
said a voice, then a pause.
Captain Davis. Ma'am.
Davis awoke from her daydreaming to look at the ensign at the shuttlecraft airlock.
I'm sorry, Ensign, I wasn't paying any attention.
She stood and straightened her tunic. She looked down at her new uniform before starting toward the door. Even after 18 months, the extra bit of braid on her sleeve took some getting used to. She took command of Excalibur with little pomp and circumstance. There was no official change of command, as the previous captain of Excalibur had been killed during the battle with Enterprise and the M5 computer. The executive officer was also lost, and the second officer was in command while the ship was towed to Earth. Once the ship reached dry dock, many of the crew transferred or left the service altogether. This meant that not only was she herself an untested captain, but many of her crew would be new to this class of vessel. She had been fortunate that she was able to choose her own staff, cherry-picking shipmates from previous assignments so that if the ship was unfamiliar, she was at least acquainted with the people, their skills, and their talents. She also took the normal Starfleet manning ratio and flipped it around. Normal starships had a 2/3 to 1/3 ratio of men to women. Excalibur was the reverse, crewing with more women overall as well as the senior staff. Starfleet felt that this was an interesting experiment that she had proposed and was very helpful in gathering the group of individuals she chose. Davis smoothed over the black slacks and pulled her gold tunic down slightly as she stood up. She had chose the tunic and slacks over the normal comfortable miniskirt uniform. She gave her staff the choice, but for herself, she felt that it made asserting command respect from subordinates a bit difficult, showing too much leg. Davis followed the ensign onto the torpedo deck. The old traditional boatswain's whistle was sounded, officially welcoming Excalibur's captain aboard. Davis looked around the deck quickly, locating the officer of the deck.
"Attention on deck,"
announced the young man. The few crewmen working around the area came to attention.
Permission to come aboard, sir?
"Permission granted, Captain. Welcome aboard."
As you were,
she said to the crewmen. They returned their captain's smile and went about their work. Davis shook the lieutenant's hand.
Congratulations on your accelerated promotion, Lieutenant Sky, as well as your posting as navigator. I think both are well deserved.
"Thank you, Captain,"
said Sky, escorting Davis out of the sliding door and into the corridor.
"I'm told it was based on your recommendation."
Well, you earned it. Let's just make sure you keep on earning it.
"You can count on it, Captain. I have work to do in auxiliary control. Can we get together for drinks later?"
Of course, I hope we can invite some others and make it into a family get-together, assuming that they all have made it aboard.
I can't recall exactly how many have reported aboard, but I think we can count on a good turnout.
Well, then, see you there,
said as she entered a turbo lift. Skye went down an adjacent corridor.
Bridge.
The doors were opened in a matter of minutes, but the delay seemed like an eternity. Davis felt as if she was facing a moment of truth. The last time she had seen the bridge, it was in disarray, still being upgraded. She had often felt as if she had bitten off more than she could chew when facing this 18-month deadline to not only refit the ship, but to get her space-worthy and out on patrol again. Finally the lift doors opened. She let out her breath, a little too loudly, however. Several working crewmen whirled at the sound. Davis' eyes widened. The bridge was breathtaking. There were no signs of the disrepair or chaos of the last few months. All the familiar background noise of an operational bridge filled her ears. Like a musical composition, she could make out several distinct conversations from the lower decks reporting the station workers as they ran diagnostics on the various stations. The consoles were sleeker, more advanced, with a lot more equipment and monitors on hand for each operator. The main navigation and helm console was larger, yet everything was within reach. The main view screen was larger, and even the picture seemed clearer. What really shook her was the second turbo lift fitted close to the one in which she stood. Finally, she noticed the one object she had been avoiding, the command chair. As she stepped down to the chair, the crewmen went back to their tasks. She ran her hands over the black leather cushions and fidgeted with the command controls on the arms. She suppressed a smile. This is what she was waiting for, the command chair. Every officer dreamed of taking the command of a starship. Very few got to call it their own. She had been granted that honor. She sat down and surveyed the bridge. Actually, she knew very well what the bridge would look like. She had been studying the designs every day since she arrived on Earth, but for some reason she couldn't picture her ship looking as the plans did. She looked at the science station. Her science officer, Commander Telesa, had helped design the console as well as redesigning the ship's sensors. Telesa was a Vulcan she had served with on her last assignment. The junior science officer and her shared a great friendship. Many in her circle of influence had warned her that friendship with a Vulcan would be challenging, but Telesa was not in the least. The two had clicked immediately, and she had always requested her on her team when it required a science officer. That's where she thought Telesa might be, calibrating her precious sensors below deck. She longed for a familiar face. The men working on the consoles were only space dock personnel. She channeled the intercom system into the main screen and activated it. The sensor deck came into view, only more space dock personnel. The newly refurbished sick bay was devoid of occupants. The totally new engineering was crowded with Excalibur crew in engineering pressure suits as they worked on the matter and antimatter assembly, their helmets preventing recognition. No female-suited figures could be seen, so her chief engineer Robin Nichols was not supervising the work, which was strange since Nichols had been aboard the Excalibur the whole 18 months personally in charge of the engine refit. Another of her choices. Robin had been chief engineer of a destroyer that Kelly had had the opportunity to cross deck with to get command training. Like Telesa, she clicked with Robin so well, she couldn't think of a better person to oversee the refit of her first command. She had only seen one person so far that she knew, and that was Skye. She switched off the view screen and hit the audio intercom.
Lieutenant Skye, report.
Her voice echoed in the corridors. She thought she heard a snicker from one of the working men but dismissed the thought. She did feel a little silly calling Skye, like a lonely child calling a parent.
Captain Davis here.
Is there something wrong, Captain? I'm rather tied up at the moment.
There is nothing wrong. I thought maybe you were finished with that work and would like to go over some of the new equipment on the bridge.
Why don't you come down to auxiliary control? They've put some interesting equipment in down here. I'd like to show you.
That would be good. I'll be right down.
Good. Oh, by the way, they changed the location of auxiliary control. It's on level 20 next to the botany lab. See you in a few minutes.
Skye cut the intercom off before Davis could say anything else. She was going to point out that she knew nothing of the proposed move of the auxiliary control room. As she stood, she ran over the plans of Excalibur in her head for level 20. Davis entered the lift, but before the doors closed behind her, she uttered,
Botany lab. Really?
Davis stood in front of a set of double doors. She looked over her shoulder. The botany lab was right behind her. She was sure Sky had been pulling her leg, but the sign hanging over the door read Auxiliary Control Room. Still disbelieving, she looked closer at the sign and found it had another sign below it. The Auxiliary Control Room sign came off in her hand after she pried it off. It had been recently applied with an adhesive solution. The sign below it read Botanical Garden. With the sign in hand, Davis barged into the room.
Just what the hell is going on?
Demanded Davis as she entered the garden. She stopped dead in her tracks as she was greeted by a group of people yelling surprise. Her mouth dropped. Gathered around several tables set up below trees and flowers were food and drinks, and all around them were her command personnel, Talesa, Collier, her helm officer, Robin Nichols, Maureen Farrell, her chief medical officer, and among the other 20 or so people, Lieutenant Don Sky wearing a devilish grin.
"Welcome aboard, Captain,"
said Talesa, working up to her and greeting her with a raised eyebrow. Kelly often wondered why Vulcans did that, but thought it was their version of a smile. As more people crowded around Davis, she managed a menacing look at Sky.
You big sneak. You set me up. They changed the location of the auxiliary control, indeed.
Well, you didn't really think I'd formally invite you down to your surprise party, did you?
The party had lasted for several hours and was only now winding down. Talesa, Nichols, Farrell, and Collier sat drinking in assorted chairs. Conversation had tapered off and they were simply enjoying the peace and quiet in the company of friends. Davis peered across the room at Talesa, who was now dozing. Davis smiled as she finished the rest of her drink. Her thoughts were clouded with all the alcohol she had consumed.
"Well, it's terribly late, Kelly,"
said Nichols, breaking the silence.
"My engines need tending to."
Nichols made an attempt to stand and failed. She went crashing to the floor. Talesa went to her and helped her to her feet. Maureen Farrell likewise stood and gave Nichols a hand to steady her.
"You'll do nothing of the kind, Engineer Nichols,"
said Maureen Farrell in full medical mode.
"You need to tend to yourself. You young people don't know how to handle your liquor."
"Nonsense,"
said Nichols, trying to break the hold on her arms, and nearly sending all three of them to the deck.
"I'm as sober as any of you."
That's not saying much, Robin. We're all pretty buzzed.
"My Vulcan metabolism isn't as affected by alcohol as humans, Captain. I'll assist Engineer Nichols to her quarters."
"I don't need no statistics,"
Nichols demanded. Her head swam again as she nearly lost the ground under herself.
"Well, maybe a little bit."
"I'll go along with them, Kelly. Maybe Talesa can assist me to my quarters after we drop off Nichols. Maybe this old doctor can't hold her liquor either. Good night."
The three made their way out the door. The party was breaking up. Several other officers were making their way to exits as well. Davis decided that she should join them, and with some effort, managed to navigate the corridors back to her quarters, where she slipped her boots off and collapsed on her bunk. She sat quietly in the dimness of her quarters, dozing off, wondering how she'd feel when the morning hangover would hit her.